Imagine standing in a tiny boat, rocking on wild waves, staring up at a giant spike of rock shooting straight out of the ocean. It's taller than the Empire State Building, sharper than a knife, and surrounded by crashing waves and sharks. That's not a scene from a movie. That's Ball's Pyramid, the world's tallest sea stack, rising almost 2,000 feet out of the Pacific Ocean like nature's own skyscraper. No fresh water, no safe anchorage, no second chances. In 1965, a group of climbers looked at this impossible tower and said, "All right, let's do it." What followed then wasn't just a climb. It was a place that had chewed up boats, sent climbers home limping, and left legends full of giant centipedes, crashing waves, and heart-pounding fear. It's safe to say that not everyone was sure they would make it back. This is the unbelievable true story of how Ball's Pyramid was first conquered. Standing at a towering 562 meters above the ocean, it's one of the most jaw-dropping sights on Earth. You'll find it 643 kilometers northeast of Sydney, sitting inside Australia's beautiful Lord Howe Island Marine Park. It's a place so special that it's protected by UNESCO as a World Heritage Site. Although it's remote and surrounded by crashing waves, Ball's Pyramid keeps pulling in explorers, scientists, and scuba divers like a magnet. It was named after Henry Lidgebird Ball, a British Navy officer who discovered Lord Howe Island back in 1788. What we see today is actually the worn-down core of a massive shield volcano that erupted around 7 million years ago, rising from a lost underwater world called the Lord Howe Rise. Ball's Pyramid is 1,100 meters long and just 300 meters wide, something like a narrow skyscraper in the sea. It's officially the tallest volcanic sea stack on the planet. With its sharp cliffs and wild shape, it's both a geological treasure and a jaw-dropping reminder of how powerful nature can be. The first person to ever set foot on it was Henry Wilkinson, a geologist with the New South Wales Department of Mines, in 1882. But landing there was no walk in the park. The pyramid is perched on a submerged shelf, surrounded by crashing surf and steep, crumbly rock, which makes it very tough and dangerous to even get close. But that's not all. Nearby, strange rock islands called islets add to the drama. To the west, about 792 meters away, sits Observatory Rock and Wheatsheaf Islet. And southeast, about 3.5 kilometers out, stands a sharp peak named Southeast Rock. Together, they create a haunting, almost alien scene in the middle of the ocean. In the 1960s, Ball's Pyramid lit a fire in the hearts of Australia's most fearless climbers. Its peak was still untouched, and just looking at it stirred a wild dream, to be the first to stand on top. In 1963, one of the country's best climbers, Bryden Allen, formed a team with Jack Pettigrew, John Davis, and Dave Lambert. But when it was time to go, only Allen and Lambert could make the journey. They began their journey to the pyramid filled with hope, but the sea had other plans. Powerful tides made it impossible to land anywhere near their destination. Disheartened but not defeated, they shifted their focus and climbed a new route on nearby Mount Lidgebird. Though they couldn't conquer the pyramid, they returned home with their spirits intact and a promise to return the following year. But when the next year came, it brought with it unexpected competition. In 1964, a rival expedition led by Dick Smith with Rick Higgins, Dave Roots, and Dave Lambert set out to claim the prize first. Unlike Allen's original team, they had a major advantage: a large boat that sailed directly from Sydney, avoiding the trouble of chartering one from Lord Howe Island. They even managed to land on Ball's Pyramid, which was a feat in itself. Many believed their success was all but guaranteed. But the mountain had other plans. What began as a bold attempt quickly turned into a nightmare. Their nights were invaded by giant centipedes, forcing them to defend their camp with palm hammers. The climb proved far harsher than expected. The rock was merciless, and the mountain felt alive with danger. In the end, they returned home defeated, shaken by an adventure that was supposed to make history. However, back on the mainland, Bryden Allen wasn't the least bit surprised by their failure. To him, their approach was reckless. He felt that the team used a sledgehammer tactic where everyone rushed the summit at once without a clear plan. Allen believed true success on a mountain like Ball's Pyramid required strategy, skilled climbers leading the charge, while the rest provided support, gear, and backup. In his eyes, the rival team's downfall came from ignoring this crucial teamwork. Without it, he said, no one stood a chance against Ball's Pyramid. So in 1965, Allen put together a dream team from the Sydney Rock Climbing Club. He led the climb and was joined by John Davis, Dave Witham, and Jack Pettigrew as core members. Don Wilcox and Jack Hill from New Zealand came as support climbers. And to capture this majestic journey in its entirety, the Sydney Morning Herald pitched in £200 and sent a climber journalist, Ben Sandilands, to document the story. This support emphasized that the expedition wasn't just about reaching a summit, but about testing the limits of human endurance. But before they could even think about climbing, they had to survive the sea. Allen knew this was the deadliest part, so they trained hard. Along the rocky shores of Sydney, they learned how to read the waves and grab slippery rocks before getting swept back out. And even when they mastered that, another danger patiently waited for them: sharks. The waters around Ball's Pyramid were full of them, silent, circling, always there. This combination of rough seas, jagged rocks, and lurking predators made even reaching Ball's Pyramid an expedition in itself. The climbers began their journey in early February from Rose Bay, boarding the fully loaded Ascent flying boats named Islander and Beachcomber. Their destination was set for Lord Howe Island. Every detail of the journey reflected the scale of the challenge ahead. Among their cargo was a hefty Kingfisher HF radio, powered by two 12-volt car batteries, which are crucial lifelines in a place where isolation was both awe-inspiring and dangerous. The group had prepared themselves for a prolonged stay on the rock by carrying enough food and water to last at least 2 weeks. They were determined to see their climb through this time. They packed 2,000 feet of tough 1¼ inch manila rope for establishing fixed lines, along with an arsenal of pitons, bolts, and other iron gear to face the pyramid's daunting overhangs and vertical walls. Every piece of equipment had been hand-picked to withstand Ball's Pyramid's fierce elements. Back at the sea, at the same time, Cyclone Judy was passing through, which inadvertently delayed their arrival to Lord Howe Island by 2 days. Finally, under calmer skies, the Captain Clive Wilson expertly maneuvered his Pacific chieftain to within 40 yards of the rock's base, which was the closest he could dare. From there, the climbers swam through icy swells and shark-patrolled waters, dragging their gear to what appeared to be the most accessible ledge. It was an exhausting and precarious operation, made more complicated by the volume of supplies they needed to bring ashore to sustain the climb. Finally, they managed to get to the ledge. Once ashore, the team established a temporary camp and began scouting the terrain. They discovered a way to scramble along the rock's edge before ascending roughly 100 meters to a flatter, elevated zone. There, they found a cave. They thought it was a perfect natural shelter, perfect for installing their radio system and offering safety from storms. They looked around and were delighted to find protected rock pools nearby. These pools offered them a sanctuary for safe swimming. It was a rare moment of serenity in an otherwise hostile environment. After relaxing for a while, they reshifted their focus on the climb. Their first objective was to reach the summit of Winkelstein Steeple, the highest point the previous expedition had achieved. So, on February 12th, hauling heavy gear, Dave and Allen led the initial climb, installing fixed ropes of cheap hemp for safety on every pitch. It was a slow and back-breaking work to drag the thick rope up the pinnacle's spine, but it was a critical step toward paving the way for the next stages of their journey and to eventually achieve their ultimate goal. The next day, Jack and John took over the lead, hoping to press toward the summit. But progress was slow, and they advanced only as far as Dave and Allen had the day before. While they climbed, Dave and Allen stayed behind at base camp, tending to essential tasks like repacking gear, cooking meals and managing logistics. That evening, the two men ascended to a small bivouac cave tucked just beneath Winkelstein's steeple. They positioned themselves for a full day of climbing at first light the next day. The next day, the more they climbed, the more they realized that it was turning out to be more challenging than they had ever anticipated. The higher they went, the harder it got. Crumbling rock and sheer overhanging faces turned the climb into a brutal test of endurance. But they kept on pushing forward. Finally, after inching along a narrow, exposed knife-edge ridge for 500 feet, Bryden Allen and Dave Witham finally reached the summit on February 14, 1965, at 2:30 p.m. Minutes later, John Davis and Jack Pettigrew joined them at the top. The team toasted their monumental success with a bottle of champagne with the bubbles catching the afternoon light like the waves crashing far below. On the small, 30-yard-wide summit, they built a cairn and placed a message inside, immortalizing their achievement. Overhead, a pair of startled gannets flapped their wings, trying to return to their disturbed nesting ground. The climbers stayed there for some time, marveling at the breathtaking views from the summit. It had taken them 8 punishing hours to conquer the final 1,000 feet. Every step was fraught with dangers from the rotten rock. Below them, they could see the pyramid's 4 ridges falling sharply into the ocean. And off in the distance, they could see Lord Howe Island shimmering just 11 miles away. As night fell, the team carefully descended the treacherous South Ridge, leaving fixed ropes in place for safety. When darkness finally overtook them, they found shelter in a cave once again. The following day, February 15, 1965, another chapter was written atop Ball's Pyramid. Jack Hill of New Zealand embarked on a solo ascent, scaling the first 800 feet alone to reach a small cave where Jack Pettigrew had bivouacked the night before. There onwards, the two climbers pressed on together. By 1 p.m., they stood side by side on the summit. Their second successful ascent was a quiet but powerful echo of the triumph just a day earlier. They spent an hour at the top savoring the view, the silence, and the knowledge that they had stood where so few ever would. 2 days later, on February 17th, the climbers were picked up and ferried back to Lord Howe Island. The expedition was over, but their achievement would live on, carved into the rock, etched into history. In 1986, climbing on Ball's Pyramid was officially banned due to mounting environmental and safety concerns. Yet, in 1990, restrictions were partially lifted, allowing climbing and scientific expeditions under strict conditions. Though access is now limited, the Ball's Pyramid stands as a towering monument to the delicate balance between conquering nature and coexisting with it. While it dares anyone to dream, it also demands the respect it deserves. If you've made it this far, thank you. Your support means everything. If you're new here, consider subscribing for more extraordinary stories from the far edges of the Earth. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired. See you in the next one.